Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. Pope Francis has arrived in Iraq for the first ever papal visit and his first international trip since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Security fears have made this his riskiest visit yet, but the 84-year-old insisted he was duty-bound. In a video message, Francis said he is arriving in Iraq as a pilgrim of peace. In Indian-occupied Kashmir, a number of civilians have been injured after occupying troops used brute force to disperse peaceful protesters in Srinagar. They were protesting against the Indian occupation and for the release of Kashmir leader Mirwais Umar Farooq. Earlier, authorities announced the release of Farooq after almost 20 months of detention. However, the Kashmiri leader was put under house arrest again and was not allowed to deliver the Friday sermon. The U.S. has imposed new sanctions on Myanmar, blocking its military and ministries of defense and home affairs from trade. Meanwhile, a protester has been killed after police opened fire on people demonstrating against the coup in Mandalay City. At least 55 people have been killed and over 1,700 arrested since the February 1st coup. Pakistan's Drug Regulatory Authority has approved the use of China's Sinopharm vaccine for people over 60 years of age. The country has so far recorded more than 587,000 infections and 13,128 deaths. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.5 million lives and has infected more than 115 million people. And in tennis, Borna Coric and Martin Fucsovics have reached the quarterfinals of the ABN AMRO World Tennis Tournament. Coric eased past Serb Dusan Lajovic 6-3, 6-2. Meanwhile, Hungarian Fucsovics dispatched Spaniard Alejandro Davidovich Fokina 6-3, 6-2. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now for the news in more detail. Pope Francis has arrived in Iraq for the first ever papal visit and his first international trip since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Security fears have made this his riskiest visit yet, but the 84-year-old insisted he was duty-bound. Earlier in a video message, Francis said he is arriving in Iraq as a pilgrim of peace. Nearly 10,000 security personnel have been deployed to protect the Pope. Upon his arrival, Iraq's Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi greeted the pontiff at the airport. The U.S. has imposed new sanctions on Myanmar, blocking its military and ministries of defense and home affairs from trade. Earlier, a UN human rights investigator urged the Security Council to impose a global arms embargo on Myanmar. In Myanmar's city of Mandalay, a protester has been killed after police opened fire on people demonstrating against the coup. At least 55 people have been killed and over 1,700 arrested since the February 1st coup. Earlier, a clash over the country's United Nations representation has been averted after the junta's nominee quit. The UN mission has confirmed that the former civilian government's ambassador, Kyaw Mo Tun, will continue his job. Singapore's foreign minister has also called on Myanmar's military rulers to seek a peaceful solution to the unrest. And moving on, in Indian-occupied Kashmir, a number of civilians have been injured after Indian forces opened fire to disperse peaceful protesters in Srinagar. They were protesting against the Indian occupation and for the release of Kashmiri leader Mirwais Umar Farooq. Authorities had earlier announced to free Mirwais, but he was put under house arrest again and was barred from delivering a Friday sermon. Indian atrocities in Kashmir have risen since New Delhi scrapped its autonomy and imposed a curfew in August 2019. Over 300 Kashmiris have been killed and thousands others detained since then. And another Indian soldier has committed suicide at the regional military headquarters in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This comes just a day after a lieutenant colonel killed himself with his service weapon on the outskirts of Srinagar. Over the past 24 hours, 3 Indian soldiers have committed suicide, bringing the toll for 2021 to 4. Last year, 35 Indian soldiers in occupied Kashmir committed suicide. Indian authorities say the reasons for the suicides are not known, but past instances link their depression to active duty in oppressive operations in the valley. And in India, the protesting farmers have announced to block a major expressway outside New Delhi on Saturday to mark the 100th day of their agitation. The growers have been demanding a complete rollback of centre's 3 contentious agriculture laws since November 26th. Former cricketer and popular entertainer Navjot Singh Sidhu has also thrown his weight behind the protests. Talking to the media, Sidhu said the new laws will lead to auctioning of land in Punjab and leave its residents as slaves. Farmer union leaders say they plan to observe a Women Farmers' Day on the International Women's Day later this week. Meanwhile, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has accused New Delhi of unlawfully arresting protesters. Moving on, Afghan leader Gulbuddin Hekmatyar says intra-Afghan peace talks in Qatar have failed. Addressing a press conference, Hekmatyar gave a 10-day ultimatum to the Afghan government to fulfill his demands. Hekmatyar demanded the peace process going on in Qatar to be moved to another country. He blamed the Afghan government for deliberately prolonging the peace talks. He added that some elements in the government are hell-bent on sabotaging the peace deal. This development has come just a few days after U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad concluded consultations in Kabul with multiple stakeholders. And Arab-led coalition in Yemen says it has downed multiple Houthi drones launched towards different Saudi cities. Coalition spokesperson Colonel Turki al-Maliki said the latest Houthi strikes aimed at Jazan and Khamis Mushayed cities. Al-Maliki said Houthis are deliberately escalating hostile and terrorist assaults on civilians using ballistic missiles. He said these terrorist acts amount to war crimes. Yesterday, Houthis claimed they attacked Saudi oil facility Aramco in Jazan. Houthi strikes against Saudi targets have increased manifold in recent days amid ramped-up international efforts to end the Yemen war. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif says the 2015 nuclear deal cannot be renegotiated. In a tweet, Zarif called on the U.S. to stop posturing to no avail and implement the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Iran also welcomed a decision by the European powers not to submit an anti-Tehran resolution at the International Atomic Energy Agency. A foreign ministry spokesperson said this will save the road to diplomacy. Saeed Khatibzadeh said the plan was dropped after intensive diplomatic efforts in Tehran and capitals of all member states, specifically France, Germany, and the UK, as well as support from China and Russia. Moving on, Turkey says it has neutralized 5 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria. The defense ministry says the fighters were attempting to infiltrate the Operation Euphrates Shield region. It said the fighters were aiming to disturb the peace and security environment. The ministry said it will continue to target militants in the region. The Euphrates Shield is one of the 3 military operations that Ankara launched in northern Syria. Ankara holds the fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year conflict. In Senegal, 1 person has died in clashes with riot police on the second day of violent demonstrations. Protesters took to the streets to support the main opposition leader, Ousmane Sonko, who was detained over rape accusations. Protesters hurled rocks at police in central Dakar, who occasionally fired their guns in response during an hours-long standoff. With more demonstrations planned for today, the government has summoned the army to back the police. Sonko accuses the government of making up the rape charge against him to undermine the opposition. He was stripped of his parliamentary immunity last week. China says it will deter any separatist activity seeking Taiwan's independence, but is committed to peace and reunification. In an address to Parliament, Premier Li Keqiang said Beijing stands firmly by the One China principle. Premier Li Keqiang pledged that efforts to strengthen the People's Liberation Army will continue amid security threats. Beijing also decided to increase the country's defense spending by nearly 7% year-on-year. The meeting stressed that Beijing has zero tolerance for anyone who seeks to undermine the One China policy.
We will stay true to the letter and spirit of the principle of one country, two systems, under which the people of Hong Kong administer Hong Kong and the people of Macau administer Macau, both with a high degree of autonomy.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General says the European Union cannot be expected to defend Europe from security challenges. In an interview, Jens Stoltenberg said the European Union does not have an army of its own. He warned Europe's security depended on close transatlantic bonds and not on a quest for the continent's strategic autonomy. Stoltenberg said the EU is seeking a more geopolitical role with its foreign and defense industry policy. The NATO chief welcomed Brussels' efforts to boost spending and streamline its defense industry. He said any attempt to divide Europe and North America would weaken NATO and divide Europe. Now, the U.S. Capitol Police have requested a 60-day extension of the National Guard members deployed since January 6th riots. In a statement, Capitol Police said Acting Chief Yogananda Pittman submitted the request to the Defense Department. Defense officials say the Pentagon is reviewing the new proposal. There are currently about 5,200 National Guard troops around the building. The mission is set to end on March 12th. And the U.S. Senate has voted to take up President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus aid bill. However, the upper chamber put off the start of a contentious debate until the full text of the 628-page bill is read aloud. A vote on the final passage of the bill is expected to come over the weekend. The party line vote of 50 to 51 illustrated that Democrats can expect little if there is any Republican support. Meanwhile, President Biden says he will continue to speak to Republicans about the bill.
I've been talking to a lot of my Republican friends in the House and the Senate, continue to do that, and we have. We have a number of meetings with Republicans on the coronavirus bill, and House, Senate, a combination of both, so we're keeping everybody informed.
Amnesty International says at least 17,000 health workers have died worldwide from COVID-19 over the last year. Brazil has reported almost 1,700 new coronavirus fatalities overnight as its death toll crosses 260,000. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.56 million lives and infected over 115 million people. More on the pandemic in this report.
Rising COVID-19 cases and stronger new variants are threatening a more lethal third wave while posing new challenges to the already less than perfect vaccine drives. After 2 straight days of record deaths in Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro continues to downplay the crisis and snub voices calling for restrictions. Meanwhile, Cuba has begun late-stage trials of its most advanced experimental COVID-19 vaccine. The White House defended President Joe Biden over his remarks on Texas and Mississippi officials, lifting restrictions on mask mandates.
The behavior of a Neanderthal, just to be very clear, the behavior of. Look, I think the president, what everybody saw yesterday was a reflection of his frustration and exasperation, which I think many American people have, that for almost a year now, people across the country have sacrificed. And many times they haven't had information they need from the federal government. They haven't had access to a greater understanding of what the public health guidelines should look like.
In the UK, authorities have designated another newly found strain as a variant under investigation, keeping it on the watch list. Sweden and Germany have extended their recommendation for the AstraZeneca vaccine to cover people over 65. Meanwhile, to save shots, Italy and Germany are administering just a single dose to people who have been infected with the virus up to 6 months beforehand.
Now it has certainly been recommended. Alongside this, we also now have this direct experience. Many of my healthcare professionals, general practitioners who have contracted COVID and who are not vaccinated and have proven to have a very high antibody rate. As a result, there is actually this situation.
Australia has asked the European Commission to review a decision by Italy to block a shipment of AstraZeneca's vaccine. Meanwhile, the Japanese government plans to extend a state of emergency for Tokyo and 3 prefectures until March 21st. Research shows that antibodies triggered by exposure to South Africa's dominant variant can prevent infection by other variants.
Meanwhile, COVID-19 has claimed 52 more lives in Pakistan overnight, raising the death toll to 13,128. The Health Ministry reported 1,579 new infections over the last 24 hours. The ministry said the infections have surpassed 587,000. It said more than 556,000 people have recovered from COVID-19 so far. Meanwhile, the Drug Regulatory of Pakistan has approved the use of China's Sinopharm vaccine for people over 60 years of age. More stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. Scientists have spotted a new planet orbiting a star relatively near to our solar system. The discovery may offer a prime opportunity to study the atmosphere of a rocky Earth-like alien world. Scientists say Gliese 486b, also classified as super-Earth, is not itself a promising candidate for being a refuge for life. However, its study is expected to provide scientists with highly valuable data. It can help them decide the atmosphere of other exoplanets that may host alien life. Located in our celestial neighborhood, about 26 light-years away, Gliese 486b is one of the closest exoplanets to Earth. It has a rocky surface like Earth and is thought to be inhospitable, hot and dry like Venus, with possible rivers of lava. An 8.1 magnitude earthquake and a series of powerful undersea aftershocks struck northeast of New Zealand. Authorities say 3 offshore quakes between magnitude 7.2 and 8.1 hit the country's North Island in less than 8 hours. The powerful quakes triggered early tsunami warning. However, tsunami waves passed without causing substantial damage on the island. Earlier, officials warned that waves could reach 3 meters above high tide levels. Authorities said thousands of residents who had evacuated to higher ground could now return to their homes. And Russia's northwest Karelia region has staged an exhibition in the freezing waters of the White Sea. More about this unique exhibition in this report.
The ice of the White Sea is a strange setting for an art display. At the end of February, photographer Viktor Lyagushkin and artist Denis Lotrev brought their pictures, paintings and sculptures to the frozen sea to pull them into the water. To see the exhibition, visitors have to put on a diving suit and brace temperatures close to zero.
The pictures are cool. I saw them before, but under the sea. They look different. The effect is very interesting. With the light of a torch, they begin to shine and look tri-dimensional.
Lyagushkin, known for his works for National Geographic, put up pictures of the White Sea flora and fauna.
It is well known that the climate is changing. It is a fact, although it is -30 today. The White Sea is the southernmost of all Arctic seas. It changes very fast. It may happen that those creatures, whose life is frozen onto the ice, will become extinct in the White Sea in the nearest future. That is why we are taking pictures with them and put them on display underwater, to let them survive at least on the photographs, because they cannot become extinct in the White Sea.
Artworks will stay on display till approximately April 15th. Till the ice starts melting. Then the masterpieces will return to the studio.
In 1988, Eddie Murphy's Coming to America opened to widespread acclaim. The movie catapulted Murphy to international stardom. More than 30 years later, the Hollywood A-lister and Arsenio Hall are reprising their roles in a sequel. More about this in the following report.
I am Hakim Jaffer, King of Zamunda. You are the heir to the throne. Yes, my son.
Just like old wine, comedian Eddie Murphy is getting better and better every day. The plot will revolve around the adventure of newly crowned King Akeem, played by Murphy himself. Comedian Tracy Morgan says he is overjoyed to land a role in the film.
That's the last surprise.
And to be considered to be a part of it and to play the role that I played, man, I would have did any role in this movie, but to be the boy's uncle, I'm directly connected with Eddie in this movie, so we all family, and that's how we felt.
Most of the original cast is making their return in the sequel, including James Earl Jones as King Yaffe Joffer and Sherry Headley as Akeem's wife Lisa. Another new face includes Murphy's daughter, Bella Murphy.
I think he just saw how passionate I was about it, and he made an exception and asked me if I wanted to audition for the princess, which I was like, yes, I do. And then I went in and did it, and yeah.
He's supposed to be like the prince of Wakanda.
Wakanda is a fictional place.
Not to everybody.
Zamunda is a very real nation.
The sequel to Murphy's classic is released on Amazon Prime Video. Paramount Pictures was supposed to release the film in theaters, but its distribution rights were sold to Amazon Studios because of the pandemic.
The king pays no child support.
No child support for 30 years and you came back.
On to the latest in business. European markets have declined as another surge in bond yields continues to roil global stocks. The CAC 40 in Paris is leading the losses, dropping nearly 1%. The pan-European stock 600, London's FTSE and Frankfurt's DAX also shed close to 1%. Italy's FTSE MIB has slipped marginally as well. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed, with all bourses shedding, while shares in mainland China and Hong Kong gained. And it's time now to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. You can follow us on social media at indus.news.